In the bitter Montana winter of 1910, something moved in the darkness beneath Glacier Peak. Railway workers drilling through solid granite reported sounds that had no earthly explanation. Scraping, breathing, movement where no living thing should exist. The Northern Pacific Railway's ambitious tunnel project promised to connect remote mining towns to civilization, but instead, it awakened something that had slumbered in the mountain's heart for centuries. What emerged from those testimonies wasn't just another tall tale from exhausted laborers. It was the beginning of one of America's most haunting cryptid encounters, a creature the workers would come to call the Tunnel Dweller. This is a story of men who ventured too deep into places untouched by light, and what they found staring back at them from the absolute darkness. The year 1910 marked a turning point for Montana's remote wilderness. The Northern Pacific Railway had embarked on one of its most ambitious projects, boring a tunnel through the granite heart of Glacier Peak to connect the isolated mining settlements of the Rocky Mountain frontier. The project represented more than mere engineering. It was humanity's bold attempt to conquer the untamed wilderness that had remained largely untouched since the last ice age. Chief Engineer Thomas McKenna arrived in late September with a crew of 47 men, mostly Irish and Scottish immigrants drawn by the promise of steady work and good wages. The tunnel entrance was carved into the southeastern face of Glacier Peak, approximately 8,200 feet above sea level. McKenna had chosen this location after months of geological surveys, believing the granite formation would provide stable conditions for the ambitious 2-mile bore that would reduce travel time between mining camps by nearly 3 days. The work began with characteristic frontier determination. Steam-powered drilling equipment was hauled up treacherous mountain paths by mule teams, while workers established a camp of canvas tents and wooden shacks that would serve as their base for what was projected to be an 18-month operation. The mountains seemed to welcome their presence initially. The granite proved softer than expected, allowing faster progress than McKenna's most optimistic projections. By November, the tunnel had penetrated nearly 800 feet into the mountain. The men worked in 12-hour shifts, with one crew handling the dangerous dynamite blasting, while another cleared debris and extended the narrow-gauge rail line that would eventually carry ore cars through completed passage. Kerosene lanterns and torches provided the only illumination in the growing darkness, creating dancing shadows that played tricks on tired eyes. It was during the third week of November that drilling supervisor Patrick O'Malley first reported the sounds. Working the night shift, O'Malley and his 6-man team were preparing charges for the next morning's blast when they heard what he later described as breathing that weren't human, but weren't animal neither. The sound seemed to come from deeper in the mountain, beyond the current tunnel face, as if something large was drawing air through passages that shouldn't exist. O'Malley reported the incident to McKenna, who initially dismissed it as the natural settling of rock under pressure, or perhaps groundwater flowing through unseen cavities. Such explanations satisfied no one who had actually heard the sounds. Night shift worker Sean Murphy described it differently, like something the size of a horse, but breathing slow and deep, like it was thinking about us being there. The sounds grew more frequent as the tunnel pushed deeper. By December, nearly half the crew had heard what became known as the breathing. More disturbing were the reports of movement, not the random shifting of loose rock, but purposeful sounds suggesting something was pacing parallel to their excavation, following their progress from deeper within the mountain. McKenna faced a growing crisis of morale. Hardened miners who had worked dangerous shafts across the American West were becoming increasingly reluctant to enter the tunnel, especially during night shifts. Several men requested transfers to other projects, willing to forfeit their accumulated wages rather than continue working in what they increasingly viewed as cursed ground. The first visual sighting occurred on December 18, 1910. Tunnel foreman James McClintock was conducting a routine inspection when his kerosene lamp illuminated something that shouldn't have been there. In a natural cavity exposed by recent blasting, approximately 15 feet above the tunnel floor, McClintock reported seeing a shape that moved wrong, too big for a man, but standing like one. The creature, for McClintock insisted it was alive, appeared to be watching their operation. When McClintock raised his lamp higher, he caught what he described as eyes that reflected light like a cat's, but bigger and they knew things. The sighting lasted perhaps 10 seconds before the creature withdrew deeper into what appeared to be a natural passage system that the tunnel construction had inadvertently breached. McClintock's report marked the end of any pretense that the disturbances were natural phenomena. The tunnel dweller, as the men began calling it, had revealed itself. McKenna now faced a choice that would determine not only the fate of his engineering project, but the lives of every man under his command. The mountain held secrets that predated human presence in the region, and something ancient had been disturbed by their intrusion into its domain. To understand what the railway workers encountered, one must delve into the geological and cultural history of Glacier Peak itself. The mountain stands as one of the oldest geological formations in the northern Rockies. Its granite core formed during the Precambrian era over 1.8 billion years ago. Long before human footsteps echoed through its valleys, Glacier Peak harbored an extensive network of natural caverns and passages carved by millennia of water flow and tectonic activity. The indigenous peoples of the region, primarily the Blackfoot and Kootenai tribes, maintained detailed oral traditions about Glacier Peak that painted it as a place of profound spiritual significance and considerable danger. Tribal elder Joseph Running Bear, interviewed by ethnographer Dr. Margaret Whitehorse in 1923, spoke of ancient prohibitions against venturing into the breathing mountain. According to tribal legends passed down through countless generations, the peak was home to Ojikita, a guardian spirit that dwelt in the mountain's depths and protected the sacred places from those who would defile them. These oral traditions describe the guardian as neither holy animal nor spirit, but something between worlds, a massive, intelligent being that could move through stone as easily as humans move through air. The Blackfoot believed that Ojikita had slumbered in the mountain's heart since the time when ice covered the world, awakening only when the sacred boundaries were violated by those who lacked proper spiritual preparation. More intriguing were the specific details preserved in tribal memory. The guardian was said to possess an uncanny intelligence, capable of learning human patterns and anticipating their movements. It could navigate the mountain's interior through passages unknown to surface dwellers, appearing wherever it chose within the vast underground network. Most significantly, the oral traditions insisted that the guardian was not malevolent by nature, but rather protective, a distinction that would prove crucial to understanding the events that unfolded in the railway tunnel. Archaeological evidence supports the presence of indigenous peoples in the Glacier Peak region for at least 8,000 years. Dr. Harrison Blackwood's 1934 expedition discovered petroglyphs in caves approximately 4 miles southeast of the tunnel site that depicted large, humanoid figures alongside what appeared to be representations of underground passages. Carbon dating of organic materials found in association with these cave paintings suggested they were created between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. European exploration of the area began in earnest during the 1860s as prospectors and trappers pushed into Montana territory following rumors of gold and silver deposits. Several expedition journals from this period contain references to strange sounds and sightings near Glacier Peak, though these accounts were typically dismissed as a product of isolation, altitude sickness, or encounters with known wildlife such as bears or mountain lions. Trapper Ezekiel Morrison's 1867 diary, discovered in the Montana Historical Society archives in 1952, contains a particularly detailed account that closely parallels the railway workers' later experiences. Morrison described camping near the base of Glacier Peak and hearing breathing like a giant's bellows emanating from what appeared to be solid rock. He reported seeing a man-shaped shadow moving against the starlight near a cliff face where no human could reasonably climb. Morrison's account gains credibility from his reputation as a reliable observer and his detailed knowledge of regional wildlife. His diary makes clear distinctions between the sounds and movements he attributed to known animals and the phenomena he observed near Glacier Peak. Most significantly, Morrison noted that the sound ceased entirely when he moved his camp more than half a mile from the mountain, suggesting that whatever he encountered was territorial and specifically associated with the peak itself. The geological surveys conducted prior to the tunnel construction revealed extensive limestone caverns beneath the granite surface, particularly in the areas where sedimentary deposits from an ancient inland sea had been compressed beneath the later granite intrusions. These natural cave systems created an underground network that potentially extended for miles beneath the mountain, providing ample space for a large creature to move undetected. Chief Engineer McKenna's preliminary reports, filed with the Northern Pacific Railway headquarters in St. Paul, Minnesota, acknowledged the presence of significant natural cavities, but dismissed concerns about structural integrity. The surveys had detected air movement within the cave systems, indicating extensive passages that connected to surface openings elsewhere on the mountain. What the engineers failed to consider was the possibility that these passages might already be inhabited. The convergence of geological reality, indigenous spiritual tradition, and documented historical accounts created a foundation that lent credibility to the railway workers' claims. Rather than isolated fantasies born from dangerous work and harsh conditions, their reports appeared to be the latest chapter in a story that stretched back thousands of years, a story of something ancient and intelligent that called Glacier Peak home. The question facing McKenna and his crew was no longer whether something lived within the mountain, but rather how to proceed with their construction while respecting the presence of what tribal traditions insisted was a guardian of sacred space. The industrial age's confidence in conquering nature was about to face a test that no engineering manual had prepared them to handle. As December 1910 deepened into the harshest winter in Montana's recorded history, the evidence of the tunnel dwellers' presence became impossible to ignore. Chief Engineer McKenna, initially skeptical of his workers' reports, found himself compelled to document incidents that challenged every rational explanation he could devise. His detailed logs, preserved in the Northern Pacific Railway archives, provide a methodical account of encounters that grew increasingly bold and undeniable. December 22nd marked the first physical evidence. During routine morning inspection of the previous night's blasting work, Foreman McClintock discovered footprints in the fine granite dust that coated the tunnel floor. The prints were unlike anything in known zoological records, approximately 18 inches long and 7 inches wide, with 5 distinct toe impressions and what appeared to be claw marks extending beyond each digit. Most unsettling was their depth. The prints pressed nearly 2 inches into packed stone dust, indicating a creature of enormous weight, moving with deliberate purpose. McKenna ordered plaster casts made of the clearest prints before allowing work to continue. When compared to reference materials, the footprints showed characteristics of both human and bear anatomy, yet belonged definitively to neither species. The toe arrangement suggested bipedal locomotion, while the size and claw marks indicated an animal far larger than any known North American fauna. The prints led from a blast cavity toward the tunnel entrance, then simply vanished on solid granite, where no tracks should be possible to erase. Photography became McKenna's next investigative tool. Using a bulky camera and magnesium flash powder borrowed from a mining surveyor in the nearby town of Glacier Falls, McKenna began systematically documenting the tunnel's interior. The resulting photographs revealed anomalies that were invisible to the naked eye in the dim kerosene lighting. Several images showed what appeared to be scratch marks on the tunnel walls, carved deep into solid granite at heights exceeding 12 feet above the floor. More disturbing were the photographs that captured movement. In a series of images taken 30 seconds apart during the night shift of December 28th, a dark mass visible in the background shifted position between frames. The shape was too large and moved too purposefully to be explained as photographic artifacts or camera movement. Enhancement techniques available at the time revealed what appeared to be a hulking figure withdrawing into shadows beyond the reach of the artificial lighting. The workers themselves began maintaining detailed logs of encounters, transforming from frightened laborers into amateur naturalists driven by a mixture of fear and fascination. Sean Murphy's journal, written in careful handwriting despite his limited formal education, described the creature's apparent intelligence. It watches us work, learning our patterns. When we blast at the usual time, it's gone before the charges detonate. When we change the schedule, it takes longer to disappear, like it's figuring out the new timing. Physical interactions escalated throughout January 1911. Tools left overnight near the tunnel face were regularly moved or manipulated. Heavy drilling equipment weighing several hundred pounds was found repositioned with a precision that suggested careful examination rather than random disturbance. Most unnerving were the modifications. Drill bits were sometimes found sharpened to impossible keenness, as if something with access to superior metallurgical knowledge was improving human tools according to its own understanding of their function. The creature's respiratory patterns became a constant presence. Workers reported that the breathing sounds followed predictable cycles, growing deeper and more pronounced during periods of heavy human activity within the tunnel. Dr. Samuel Hendricks, a physician from Glacier Falls who treated several workers for anxiety-related conditions, spent 3 nights in the tunnel conducting what he termed acoustic observations. Hendricks' medical report, filed with the Montana Territory Health Department, provided scientific credibility to the workers' accounts. Using a primitive stethoscope pressed against the tunnel walls, Hendricks detected rhythmic air movement that corresponded precisely to the breathing sounds reported by the crew. The airflow originated from passages beyond the current excavation and followed pattern consistent with a large respiratory system operating under conscious control rather than automatic biological function. Temperature variations within the tunnel defied meteorological explanation. While outside temperatures plunged to 40 degrees below zero, the tunnel maintained a consistent 68 degrees Fahrenheit. More significantly, thermal readings taken at various points along the excavation revealed warm spots that moved in correlation with reported sightings. These thermal signatures suggest a large, warm-blooded creature maintaining body heat through metabolic processes far more efficient than those of known mammals. Acoustic analysis revealed another layer of evidence. The creature appeared capable of vocal mimicry, reproducing human conversations with uncanny accuracy. Workers reported hearing their own voices calling from deeper in the tunnel, speaking words and phrases from conversations held hours or days earlier. The mimic speech included specific technical terminology related to tunnel construction, suggesting not only the ability to reproduce sounds, but to understand their contextual meaning. Perhaps most compelling were the instances of apparent communication attempts. On several occasions, workers reported hearing rhythmic tapping that seemed to respond to their own tool strikes against the rock face. When they experimented with deliberate patterns, 3 strikes followed by 2, the responding sounds would mirror the sequence exactly, then elaborate upon it with additional variations that suggest a mathematical or musical intelligence. McKenna's final evidence report, submitted to railway headquarters on February 15, 1911, concluded that the tunnel construction had encountered an unknown species of considerable intelligence, apparently indigenous to the mountain's interior cave systems. The report recommended suspension of construction pending consultation with naturalists and possibly military advisors, as the creature's capabilities appeared to exceed those of any documented North American wildlife. The evidence had transformed from worker superstitions into documented scientific anomaly, forcing McKenna to confront a reality that challenged the fundamental assumptions of industrial progress and humanity's relationship with the wilderness they sought to conquer. News of the tunnel dweller reached the outside world through multiple channels, creating a storm of controversy that divided scientific opinion and captured public imagination across the American West. The Northern Pacific Railway found itself at the center of a debate that threatened both the company's reputation and the completion of a project representing millions of dollars in investment and strategic importance for regional development. Dr. Cornelius Blackthorne, professor of zoology at the University of Chicago and a prominent skeptic of cryptozoological claims, arrived at Glacier Peak on March 3, 1911, leading a team of scientists commissioned by the railway to provide definitive explanations for the reported phenomena. Blackthorne approached the investigation with the methodical skepticism that had made him famous for debunking similar claims across the frontier, including the alleged Minnesota Iceman and various Bigfoot sightings throughout the Pacific Northwest. Blackthorne's initial assessment dismissed the physical evidence as misinterpretation of natural phenomena combined with mass hysteria brought on by isolation and dangerous working conditions. The footprints, he argued, were likely created by bears whose paw impressions had been distorted by the settling of fine stone dust. The breathing sounds were explained as air movement through natural cavities created by the blasting operations, while the temperature variations resulted from geothermal activity common in granite formations of the region's geological age. However, Blackthorne's confidence wavered during his first night in the tunnel. Accompanied by McKenna and 3 volunteers from the work crew, the professor experienced what he later described in his private journal as auditory phenomena that challenged conventional zoological classification. The breathing sounds were far too regular and purposeful to be explained by natural air movement, while the apparent vocal mimicry demonstrated cognitive capabilities that exceeded those of any known North American species. More troubling for Blackthorn's scientific worldview were the creature's responses to his attempts at controlled observation. When the professor placed food offerings at specific locations within the tunnel, they disappeared overnight with no trace of how they had been removed. Motion detection experiments using primitive tripwire mechanisms revealed something moving through the tunnel with sufficient intelligence to avoid or disable the devices without triggering them accidentally. Blackthorn's colleague, paleontologist Dr. Sarah Whitmore from Harvard University, provided a different perspective that lent credibility to the possibility of an unknown species. Whitmore's examination of the claw marks on the tunnel walls revealed tool patterns consistent with deliberate excavation rather than random scratching. The marks showed evidence of systematic exploration, as if something was conducting its own investigation of the human intrusion into its domain. The evidence suggests a creature of remarkable intelligence, Whitmore wrote in her preliminary report. The systematic nature of the markings, the apparent tool use evidenced by the modified drilling equipment, and sophisticated acoustic mimicry indicate cognitive capabilities that approach or exceed those of higher primates. If genuine, this represents a species that has evolved in isolation within these cave systems for thousands, possibly tens of thousands of years. Public reaction to the scientific expedition's preliminary findings created a media sensation that extended far beyond Montana's borders. Newspapers from San Francisco to New York published sensationalized accounts of the Montana monster, while legitimate scientific journals found themselves compelled to address what was rapidly becoming a matter of significant academic interest. The Smithsonian Institution dispatched its own team of researchers, lending official credibility to what had previously been dismissed as frontier folklore. Religious leaders entered the controversy with interpretations that reflected the spiritual tensions of the era. Reverend Josiah Blackwood of the Montana Territory Methodist Conference proclaimed the creature a demon of the depths unleashed by humanity's prideful attempt to conquer God's creation. His sermons drew large congregations from surrounding communities, adding a spiritual dimension to the scientific and commercial pressures facing the railway project. Conversely, several indigenous spiritual leaders saw the events as validation of their ancestral traditions. Chief Walking Bear of the Regional Blackfoot Council offered to serve as intermediary between the railway workers and what he identified as Ojikitamakik, the mountain guardian. His proposal involved traditional ceremonies to seek the guardian's permission for the tunnel construction, an approach that many workers found more appealing than the scientific community's attempts at capture or elimination. The railway's corporate leadership faced mounting pressure from investors and regional politicians who viewed the tunnel as essential for Montana's economic development. Company President Harrison Steele issued public statements minimizing the significance of the reported encounters, while privately authorizing substantial bonuses for any crew willing to continue construction work. The financial incentives attracted a new wave of workers, primarily recent immigrants and drifters willing to accept higher risks for better wages. Among the new arrivals was Marcus Donnelly, a former military explosives expert who brought a more aggressive approach to deal with the tunnel's mysterious inhabitant. Donnelly advocated for systematic exploration of the cave systems, using controlled demolitions to flush out or eliminate whatever was interfering with construction. His proposals found support among frustrated engineers, but horrified both the scientific observers and the indigenous advisors. The conflict between different approaches to the tunnel dweller created dangerous tensions within the work camps. Traditional workers who had developed a grudging respect for the creature's intelligence opposed aggressive tactics, while newcomers dismissed such attitudes as superstitious cowardice. Several confrontations nearly escalated to violence before McKenna imposed strict protocols separating the two factions. Photography enthusiast William Hartley captured some of the most compelling evidence during this period, using improved camera equipment and longer exposure times to document anomalies within the tunnel. His photographs revealed architectural modifications that appeared overnight, carefully stacked stone formations, and what appeared to be deliberately placed markers that suggested the creature was creating its own mapping system of the human activities. The controversy reached a crescendo when Territorial Governor Samuel Crawford announced his intention to visit the site personally, bringing with him federal authorities empowered to shut down the project if it posed threats to public safety or regional stability. The political implications of the tunnel dweller had grown beyond mere scientific curiosity into a matter of governmental concern, that would determine the fate of everyone involved in the mountain's dark secrets. April 15, 1911, dawned with an unseasonable warmth that melted snow from Glacier Peak's lower elevations, creating conditions that would fundamentally alter the relationship between the tunnel workers and their mysterious cohabitant. The combination of snowmelt infiltration and recent blasting operations had destabilized sections of the natural cave system, forcing the tunnel dweller into more direct contact with human activities than either species had previously experienced. Marcus Donnelly's aggressive exploration tactics had succeeded in mapping several interconnected passages beyond the main tunnel bore, using controlled explosions to open pathways into what appeared to be a vast underground network. His team discovered chambers large enough to house entire buildings, carved by millennia of water flow, and connected by passages that showed clear evidence of purposeful modification. Tool marks on the walls indicated that something intelligent had been expanding and improving these natural formations for an extended period. The first direct confrontation occurred during Donnelly's attempt to place motion-activated cameras in the deepest accessible chamber, approximately 200 feet beyond the current tunnel face. Working with two assistants, Donnelly had just finished installing the photographic equipment when the chamber's temperature dropped precipitously, and the familiar breathing sounds grew loud enough to vibrate the camera mounting hardware. What emerged from the shadows exceeded every previous description and challenged the observer's ability to process what they were witnessing. The tunnel dweller stood nearly 9 feet in height, with a powerful humanoid frame covered in coarse, dark hair that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the kerosene lamplight. Its face combined features that suggested both human and simian ancestry, but evolved along pathways that had never appeared in the fossil record of surface-dwelling species. Most striking were the creature's eyes, large, intelligent, and unmistakably aware in ways that transcended animal consciousness. Donnelly later wrote that looking into those eyes was like confronting a professor who had been studying us far longer than we had been studying him. The tunnel dweller examined the humans with obvious curiosity rather than hostility, tilting its massive head and making soft vocalizations that resembled speech patterns without forming recognizable words. The encounter lasted approximately 4 minutes before the creature withdrew, but not before performing an action that demonstrated intelligence of disturbing sophistication. The tunnel dweller carefully removed the camera equipment from its mounting, examined it with obvious understanding of its mechanical function, then placed it gently on the chamber floor in a position that would allow continued photography of the area, but from an angle that would not violate what it apparently considered its privacy. Donnelly's photographs from this encounter, developed 3 days later, provided the first clear images of the tunnel dweller in sufficient detail to support scientific analysis. The creature's anatomy showed adaptation for life in perpetual darkness, enlarged eyes, enhanced muscle development for navigating rocky terrain, and what appeared to be elongated fingers capable of remarkable dexterity. Most significantly, the photographs revealed tool-wearing behavior. The creature carried what appeared to be carved implements attached to a crude belt arrangement. News of the direct encounter triggered immediate response from all parties involved in the controversy. Dr. Blackthorne demanded immediate access to the photographs and proposed capturing the creature for scientific study, while indigenous advisors insisted that such actions would violate sacred protocols and potentially endanger everyone in the region. The railway company found itself torn between scientific opportunity and the practical necessity of completing the tunnel construction. Chief Walking Bear arrived at the site within days of learning about the confrontation, bringing with him 3 tribal elders and traditional ceremonial materials. His proposal was simple but radical: establish formal communication with Ojikita through traditional protocols that acknowledge its status as the mountain's guardian rather than treating it as a scientific specimen or obstacle to industrial progress. The communication ceremony, conducted at the tunnel entrance on April 22nd, followed rituals that predated European contact by centuries, using traditional chants, offerings of tobacco and crafted items, and symbolic gestures passed down through tribal oral tradition. Walking Bear attempted to establish respectful contact with the mountain's ancient inhabitant. The railway workers, initially skeptical of what they viewed as primitive superstition, found themselves deeply moved by the ceremony's dignity and obvious spiritual significance. The tunnel dwellers' response exceeded everyone's expectations. During the ceremony's conclusion, The creature emerged from the tunnel entrance in broad daylight for the first time in recorded memory. Rather than the aggressive posture that might be expected from a territorial animal, it approached the ceremonial area with obvious respect, carrying what appeared to be its own offerings, carved stone objects, and carefully selected mineral specimens that demonstrated both artistic sensibility and geological knowledge. The exchange that followed transcended language barriers through a combination of gestures, vocalizations, and symbolic presentations that suggested sophisticated diplomatic protocols. The tunnel dweller appeared to understand that the humans were seeking permission for their construction activities, rather than attempting conquest or invasion. In response, it led a small group, including Walking Bear, McKenna, and Dr. Whitmore, deeper into the cave system than any human had previously traveled. The guided tour revealed wonders that transformed understanding of both the creature's capabilities and the mountain's hidden geography. Vast chambers contained what could only be described as architecture, carefully arranged stone formations that serve functional purposes, including water collection, air circulation, and what appeared to be astronomical observation points aligned with openings to the surface. The tunnel dweller had created a sophisticated underground civilization adapted to its unique environment. Most remarkable were the historical artifacts preserved within the deeper chambers. Stone carvings depicted the arrival of human populations in the region, the changes brought by European settlement, and what appear to be prophetic representations of industrial development, including images that closely resembled steam locomotives and mining operations. The creature or its ancestors have been observing and recording human activities for generations, accumulating knowledge that spans centuries of regional history. The implications of this discovery forced a fundamental reevaluation of the entire project. The tunnel construction was not merely intruding on an animal's territory. It was disrupting a sophisticated culture that had coexisted with human development while maintaining its own advanced civilization in the mountain's depths. The weeks following the ceremonial contact transformed the Glacier Peak Tunnel project from an engineering endeavor into an unprecedented exercise in interspecies diplomacy. As Chief Walking Bear worked to establish ongoing communication protocols with the tunnel dweller, the scientific observers found themselves documenting not merely an unknown species, but evidence of a parallel civilization that had developed in isolation for millennia. Dr. Sarah Whitmore's detailed analysis of the creature's underground architecture revealed construction techniques that surpassed contemporary human capabilities in several crucial areas. The air circulation system maintained perfect atmospheric conditions throughout the extensive cave network without any apparent mechanical assistance, utilizing principles of thermodynamics that wouldn't be formally recognized by human science for another 2 decades. The water management infrastructure demonstrated hydraulic engineering that efficiently captured, purified, and distributed snowmelt and rainwater throughout the underground complex. More profound were the astronomical alignments discovered within the deeper chambers. The tunnel dweller had created observation points that tracked celestial movements with precision rivaling the best contemporary observatories. Stone markers indicated awareness of planetary cycles, seasonal variations, and stellar positions that suggested mathematical and scientific knowledge developed independently of human scholarship. These observations had clearly been maintained across generations, indicating a cultural tradition of scientific inquiry spanning centuries. The creature's historical records, carved into chamber walls with tools of remarkable sophistication, provided insights into regional history that predated written European accounts by generations. Images depicting volcanic activity corresponded precisely with geological evidence of eruptions that had shaped the mountain formation thousands of years earlier. Climate variations were recorded through symbolic representations that matched ice core data later collected by 20th century researchers. Most intriguing were the depictions of human contact throughout different historical periods. The tunnel dwellers' ancestors had apparently observed indigenous peoples, early European explorers, and the gradual development of mining and railway activities with the detached curiosity of natural historians. The carvings suggested periods of limited contact with human individuals, always initiated by the mountain dwellers and conducted according to strict protocols that maintained secrecy while allowing for a careful study of human capabilities and intentions. Communication between Chief Walking Bear and the tunnel dweller evolved rapidly once both parties established mutual respect and trust. The creature demonstrated remarkable linguistic capabilities, quickly mastering key concepts in both English and Blackfoot languages, while teaching basic elements of its own communication system. This linguistic exchange revealed a sophisticated culture with philosophical concepts that challenged human assumptions about consciousness, community, and environmental stewardship. The Tunnel Dwellers' worldview, as translated through Walking Bear's patient mediation, centered on principles of balance and long-term sustainability that contrasted sharply with industrial civilization's emphasis on rapid resource extraction and territorial expansion. The creature understood human motivations for the tunnel construction, but viewed the project within a temporal framework spanning generations rather than the immediate economic pressures driving the railway company's decisions. Dr. Blackthorne found his scientific skepticism gradually transformed into wondering respect as he documented capabilities that exceeded his understanding of biological possibilities. The Tunnel Dweller's memory appeared to function like a living library, preserving detailed information about geological changes, weather patterns, and ecological relationships spanning the creature's entire lifetime, which appeared to exceed normal mammalian longevity by several centuries. The creature's technological achievements, while different from human approaches, demonstrated solutions to environmental challenges that human engineering had not yet addressed. Its ability to move silently through solid rock appeared to involve understanding of geological stress patterns that allowed passage through natural fractures invisible to surface observers. The tool modifications it had made to human equipment improved functionality through metallurgical techniques that enhanced durability without adding weight. Perhaps most remarkably, the Tunnel Dweller possessed what could only be described as ecological intelligence, comprehensive understanding of the mountain's entire ecosystem, including plant and animal populations, water sources, mineral deposits, and weather patterns. This knowledge enabled it to predict seasonal changes, locate resources, and maintain environmental balance within its territory. The creature had effectively served as a mountain's guardian in the most literal sense, protecting and managing a complex ecosystem that supported life forms unknown to surface science. The revelation that transformed everyone's perspective came during Dr. Whitmore's examination of the deepest accessible chambers. Hidden within stone formations that had initially appeared natural, she discovered what could only be described as a library, carefully preserved records spanning thousands of years, maintained in a writing system that combined pictographic and symbolic elements to record everything from daily observations to complex mathematical calculations. The mathematical system alone represented an intellectual achievement comparable to any human civilization. The Tunnel Dwellers' ancestors had developed geometric principles, astronomical calculations, and what appear to be early forms of calculus adapted to their specific needs for understanding three-dimensional underground navigation and resource management. Their mapping system created precise representations of the entire mountain's interior structure, including passages and chambers that human exploration had not yet discovered. These discoveries forced a fundamental question that challenged the assumptions underlying the entire tunnel project. Did humans have a right to alter an environment that was already occupied by a sophisticated intelligence that had successfully maintained ecological balance for millennia? The Tunnel Dweller represented not merely an obstacle to industrial progress, but an alternative approach to civilization that might hold solutions to problems that human society had not yet recognized it would face. The mountain had become a meeting place between two different forms of consciousness, two approaches to understand the relationship between intelligence and environment, and two visions of what it meant to call a place home. The outcome of their encounter would determine more than the fate of a railway tunnel. It would establish precedents for how humanity would interact with the unknown intelligences that might be sharing the planet in ways that industrial civilization had never imagined. By early May 1911, the Glacier Peak Tunnel project had transformed from an engineering challenge into a complex negotiation between species, cultures, and competing visions of progress. The Northern Pacific Railway faced mounting pressure from investors demanding completion of the tunnel, while scientific institutions worldwide followed developments with fascination that transcended normal academic interest. The discovery of the Tunnel Dweller had implications that extended far beyond regional transportation infrastructure. Chief Engineer McKenna found himself at the center of discussions that no engineering manual had prepared him to navigate. His detailed reports to railway headquarters documented not only the technical feasibility of completing the tunnel construction, but the ethical and practical considerations a proceeding would work that would fundamentally alter the habitat of what appeared to be the last surviving member of an ancient intelligent species. The tunnel dweller, through its ongoing communication with Chief Walking Bear, had expressed willingness to accommodate the railway construction under specific conditions that reflected its understanding of both human needs and environmental preservation. The creature proposed a modified tunnel route that would avoid the most sensitive areas of its underground domain while still achieving the railway's transportation objectives. This alternative approach would require additional time and expense, but would preserve the integrity of the cave systems that serve as both home and laboratory for the mountain's ancient inhabitant. Dr. Whitmore's comprehensive report to the Smithsonian Institution provided scientific justification for protecting the tunnel dweller and its habitat. Her documentation of the creature's intellectual capabilities, technological achievements, and ecological knowledge constituted evidence of a parallel evolutionary path that had produced intelligence comparable to human consciousness, but adapted to completely different environmental conditions. The loss of such a species would represent an irreplaceable tragedy for scientific understanding of consciousness, evolution, and the possibilities for intelligent life on Earth. However, corporate and political pressures opposed any delays or modifications to the original construction plans. Railway President Harrison Steele, facing significant financial losses from the project's extended timeline, threatened to abandon the tunnel entirely if work could not proceed according to the original specifications. Regional politicians warned that failure to complete the tunnel would damage Montana Territory's economic development for decades, affecting thousands of settlers and mining operations that depended on improved transportation infrastructure. The controversy attracted attention from the highest levels of government when President William Howard Taft received a detailed briefing on the situation from territorial officials and scientific advisors. The president's response reflected the complex intersection of scientific curiosity, economic necessity, and the broader questions about humanity's relationship with the natural world that were beginning to emerge in American consciousness during the Progressive Era. Taft's decision established precedents that would influence conservation policy for generations. The federal government would support completion of the railway tunnel using the modified route proposed by the tunnel dweller, with additional funding provided to ensure that construction methods minimize environmental impact and preserve the creature's habitat. More significantly, the president designated the Glacier Peak cave systems as protected area under federal jurisdiction, creating one of the first wildlife preserves specifically designed to protect an intelligent species. The construction modifications required innovative engineering solutions that pushed the boundaries of contemporary tunnel building technology. McKenna's crews developed new drilling techniques that reduce vibration and noise, minimizing disturbance to the sensitive cave systems. The modified route added 6 months to the construction timeline and increased costs by 30%, but resulted in a tunnel that achieved the railway's objectives while preserving the integrity of the mountain's underground ecosystem. The tunnel dweller actively participated in construction oversight, using its intimate knowledge of the mountain geology to identify potential hazards and suggest solutions that human engineering might not have discovered. The creature's ability to detect unstable rock formations and underground water sources prevented several potential disasters that could have cost human lives and damaged both the tunnel project and the natural cave systems. More remarkably, the collaboration resulted in technological innovations that benefited both species. The tunnel dweller's metallurgical techniques improved the durability of human tools, while human explosives expertise allowed the creature to modify its own habitat in ways that enhanced the underground environment's functionality. This exchange of knowledge established a foundation for ongoing cooperation that extended beyond the immediate tunnel project. The successful completion of the Glacier Peak Tunnel in November 1911 marked more than an engineering achievement. It represented humanity's first successful diplomatic relationship with non-human intelligence. The precedents established during construction influenced policy approaches to similar discoveries in subsequent decades, creating frameworks for interspecies cooperation that acknowledge the rights and capabilities of intelligent non-human species. The tunnel dweller story spread throughout scientific and popular literature, inspiring a generation of researchers to approach cryptozoological investigations with greater seriousness and respect. The creature became a symbol of the possibility that intelligence and civilization might take forms that human assumptions had never anticipated, existing in environments and following evolutionary paths that paralleled human development without duplicating it. Chief Walking Bear's role in facilitating communication between species established indigenous peoples as essential intermediaries in humanity's relationship with the natural world. His success in bridging cultural and species barriers demonstrated that traditional spiritual practices often possess practical wisdom that complemented and enhanced scientific approaches to understanding complex ecological relationships. The railway tunnel served Montana's transportation needs for over 3 decades, facilitating economic development while maintaining the environmental protections that preserved the tunnel dwellers' habitat. The creature continued to inhabit the mountain's depths, occasionally interacting with researchers and maintaining the ecological balance that had sustained the region's unique ecosystem for millennia. As the 20th century progressed and human technology advanced, the lessons learned from the tunnel dweller encounter influenced approaches to environmental conservation, interspecies communication, and the recognition that intelligence might emerge from evolutionary processes that human science had never imagined. The Mountain Guardian had taught humanity that consciousness was not limited to human forms, and that wisdom might be found in the most unexpected places, hidden in the darkness beneath the earth, waiting for those brave enough to listen. The Glacier Peak Tunnel operated successfully until 1943, when changing transportation patterns and wartime resource allocation led to its official closure. The entrance was sealed, but the mountain's secrets remained protected under federal designation that evolved into modern wilderness preservation status. The tunnel dweller's fate became the subject of speculation and legend, with occasional reports from hikers and researchers suggesting that something intelligent still moved through the mountain's hidden passages. In 1987, seismic monitoring equipment installed by the U.S. Geological Survey detected rhythmic vibrations emanating from deep within Glacier Peak that matched no known geological phenomena. The pattern suggested deliberate percussion activities occurring in areas that corresponded to cave systems documented during the 1911 tunnel construction. Modern acoustic analysis revealed that these sounds followed mathematical sequences that demonstrated continued intellectual activity within the mountain's depths. Recent archaeological expeditions have discovered additional petroglyphs in caves throughout the northern Rockies that appear to depict similar guardian figures, suggesting that the tunnel dweller may not have been unique, but rather representative of a population of intelligent beings that adapted to underground environments across the continental mountain systems. These findings raise questions about what other forms of consciousness might share the planet in locations where human exploration has never penetrated. The legacy of the 1910 encounter continues to influence scientific approaches to cryptozoological investigation and environmental conservation. The protocols developed for communication with the tunnel dweller establish frameworks that researchers apply when investigating reports of unknown intelligent species, emphasizing respect, careful observation, and recognition that consciousness might emerge from evolutionary processes that human understanding has not yet encompassed. Glacier Peak stands today as it has for millennia, its granite face revealing no secrets to casual observers. But deep within its heart, in passages carved by water and time and intelligence, something ancient continues to maintain watch over mysteries that humanity has only begun to understand. The mountain breathes, and in that breathing, those who listen carefully might still hear echoes of the encounter that prove intelligence takes forms as diverse as the environments that shape it. The tunnel dweller taught humanity that we are not alone in our capacity for thought, creativity, and wisdom. We simply never knew where to look. In the darkness beneath the earth, patience and ancient knowledge wait for those bold enough to venture beyond the boundaries of what they believe possible, into realms where mystery and wonder still reign supreme.